I'd like to welcome you to CAHR 2021 special session video presentation on the film HIV Made Me Fabulous. My name is Azra Banji, and I am the research coordinator for this project. I'd like to introduce three of my colleagues, Valerie Nicholson, Ali Carter, and Marvelous Muchenje.
Kwe, welcome. I acknowledge all the ancestral traditional territories, lands, and waters across Turtle Island and all lands around Mother Earth, where we work, play, live, and especially learn from. I acknowledge the unceded ancestral traditional lands and waters of the Coast Salish. This is where I connect my body, mind, heart, and spirit, and from where I'm speaking from today. I honor the Tsleil-Waututh, the Musqueam, and the Squamish. Ninda Luisi, Elder Valerie Nicholson. The name given to me 4 days after my birth is the one the eagles watch over. I was gifted the name Nodi Wenda, which means wolf eyes, from my Dene family, and I was gifted the name Auntie from the Torres Strait Islanders. I am Mi'kmaq, Haida, Roma, and UK Islander descent. I am a mother and a grandmother and living with HIV. I'm a peer researcher and a research user co-lead to this project. I'd like to welcome you all to the CAHR 2021 special session video presentation on the film HIV Made Me Fabulous. We're going to provide a brief introduction to the film and our research project, and then the film is going to start right away. HIV Made Me Fabulous is a 10-minute film grounded in current HIV science that invites viewers to explore what it's like to live, love, and find pleasure as a woman living with HIV. The film features 3 dancers who demonstrate for us Juno's words are expressed by women living with HIV. In the film, the women prepare to meet a potential lover, find the courage to knock on the door, and ride the ensuing emotional journey that transpires. Despite the women's different circumstances and backgrounds, they are connected by the living experiences of HIV. I'd like to pass along to Dr. Ali Carter, who is the co-producer and researcher of the film, to introduce the research we're doing alongside this film project. Ali?
Thank you, Valerie. The purpose of our research is to stimulate discussion of undetectable equals untransmittable for women living with HIV globally, and assess how this film impacts specific audiences. Does it improve knowledge? Does it decrease stigma? Does it move people to change in meaningful ways? To answer these questions, we're hosting a series of screenings, both large and small, with various stakeholders, including women living with HIV, care providers, researchers, community workers, and the general public. By attending today's screening, you are participating in research. After watching the film, you'll be asked to complete a brief survey to share your thoughts and feelings of the film. We really value your feedback, and we hope that as many people as possible complete the survey. It'll only take a few minutes, and the feedback is anonymous. As you watch the film, you'll be introduced to embodied storytelling, which is an artistic method designed to utilize the body movements and narration to invite viewers to feel certain experiences that cannot be as well communicated through just information and facts alone. This means that by watching the film, we hope audiences can feel or embody the emotions of the performers through their actions and through their bodies, by how they dance, how they walk, what they do, and how they breathe. And perhaps in some small way, we can better understand the experience of living and loving with HIV from a woman's perspective. I would like to introduce you now to Marvelous, who is a PhD candidate, social work and global health practitioner, and key project advisor, who will provide some final comments about the session and how it will run.
Thank you, Ali. As we know that we'll be watching this from our houses and not in person, of course, we would have loved to hug each other like we always do at CAHR and gossip in the corridors. There are some things that we need to take into consideration. We encourage viewers to try and find a quiet and private space to watch the screening. Do not take screenshots or a recording of this session. I know it's nice to share with people on Facebook, on Twitter, but because this is a project that we would want to share widely and also hear other people's conversation, can you kindly not take any screenshots? And please have thoughtful and respectful conversations. The film addresses complex and emotional issues. Some people might find this topic challenging. Other people might find it validating and uplifting. It is difficult to know how each person may respond. If you feel uncomfortable by the issues discussed, you are welcome to leave at any time, but you are also welcome to come back and continue watching. After watching the film, we will witness a behind-the-scenes 30 minutes discussion between the writer and narrator Juno Roche and director Edmond Kilpatrick, moderated by researcher and co-producer Dr. Angela Kaida, where they delve more deeply into the process of making the film and the key messages of the film. Finally, in the last 5 to 10 minutes before the next session, there will be an opportunity to fill out a short survey, as mentioned before you join the next session. It's a survey, and something that has to be taken as a research. We will also want to make sure that you are putting your consent and you know what is involved by you participating. It is important to know that as audience members, by filling out the survey, it constitutes participation in research. If you do not want to participate, please do not complete the survey. Completion of the survey represents your consent. If you have any questions about the film for the research team, please feel free to message the research team in the chat. Alternatively, if you have concerns about the research, team leads Dr. Angela Kaida and Dr. Alison Carter will be able to respond to your questions or your clarifications. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the screening of HIV Made Me Fabulous. Thank you.
It's a difficult enough thing to be a woman in this world and exist proudly in your body. Especially as being a trans woman, there's so many layers of shame and being born in the wrong body, this disassociation from the body and this rejection of the body. We're born into bodies that we're told we should feel shame about, that we should feel are never good enough and are never perfect enough and never slim enough and never beautiful enough. And if I try to go on to, say, dating websites, that can be really exposing in relation to the fact that people completely pull apart me and sexuality and desirability because of HIV and because of my transness. That my body can't be a body that is HIV positive and is trans and is also sexy and sexual or desirable. It can't be those things. Undetectable is untransmittable, is medicalized language which talks about the history of AIDS and HIV. And actually it talks about this kind of panic moment which people felt they couldn't control and contain this virus. You know, if we make the virus in your bloodstream undetectable, then there's not enough of it to pass on. 20, 30 years ago, we were told it was this toxic thing that no one could control. That's why there would be headlines that would say, ship them off to an island and let them die, or keep them away from everyone. And don't have sex with them, stay away from them, watch the toothbrush and watch the cup that they drink out of. Make sure that if they cut themselves open that there's a cordon around them of 100 yards. So there was this notion that we had dangerous blood. What U equals U does is turns that on its head. It says we have a manageable condition. The phrase U equals U can never just be U equals U. If I go onto Tinder and say to somebody, I'm undetectable, they're not instantly going to have an understanding of what I'm talking about. So what I then need to do is to follow that up by revealing that I'm HIV positive. Or do I? But if I'm going to introduce U equals U, then I do need to tell them, because it will make no sense to them. Then it's this thing that I've got to have a conversation. I'm a trans woman living with HIV, so I've then got to dispel all the myths. And then I've got to own up to some myths, because yes, I was engaged in sex work. So I've got to own that, and then I've got to try and contextualize that in relation to my life now. And we know that a woman saying, I'm undetectable, trust me, in a face-to-face situation, it can be a risky thing. We know the incidence of intimate partner violence and coercion in relation to women living with HIV, and how it can become another stick to beat us with, to control us with and coerce us with. In some sense, it's really trying to find a balance about owning and being able to access the words U equals U, or the words undetectable equals untransmittable. We can't demonize the very stuff that sometimes has made us be the people that we are. I'm not willing to put that in a box, say that that's my immoral past. You know, I got a virus because it got into my bloodstream. It was as simple as going on holiday and a mosquito biting you and you getting malaria. I didn't think that I was ever worthy of beauty. I didn't think that I would ever be capable of creating and owning beauty. If I go back 20 years, 25 years in my life, I was a sex worker, an HIV positive sex worker, an HIV positive trans sex worker, who people would look at on the street as if I was worthless. But I never really saw it like that. I just saw that I was doing what I needed to do to try and survive, but also to try and do good, to try and drag myself up continually. But like I always was on this quest to create beauty around me. So for me to actually have this space that I've owned and crafted, and it's just a tiny sliver of space in the middle of nowhere, but it's safety to me and it's security. It really is everything that I didn't think I could manifest, I've manifested. So often we're told that it will be a man or it will be another person that will complete us. And in a way we are there very much to serve or service other people, and to care for other people, to look after other people, to make sure in relation to sex somebody else is coming before you do. And I feel like it's probably one of the greatest feats of my life that I've got to a place where I recognise that my pleasure can be centred, and it's important, it's valid. The history of HIV and AIDS has been the history of men and men's sexuality. You know, you can't escape the fact that men control the narratives, all narratives. So if you look at most campaigns historically for U equals U, most safe sex campaigns have been directed at men, and they seldom featured women. It's very difficult for there to be a narrative around what U equals U means for women, because women often don't have the money to create their own campaigns. We might be offered a seat at the table to put our point of view forward, and we might become a face on the poster, but is it women creating a set of posters that really speak to women about being undetectable? We just don't own the narrative. The message that I would like to see out there for women is you own your body. Whether that body contain HIV or not contain HIV, you own that body. You have every right to take risks, to not take risks. You know, you have every right to all the same stuff that everybody else has, that men have. What I would want women to know is, you know, as many words as they want to say are enough, or as much information as they want to give is enough. And you are fabulous. All I know is that the combination of my writing, my words, the world that I create when I write, and the world that I live in, my home, my house, and how I can be sexual in this space, the kind of freedom I feel from being outside and self-pleasuring and feeling my body naked in the elements with the sun coming down on my body, that sense where there's no words, where there's no interference, where there's no labels, where there's no stuff becoming in between. It's about a purity that I feel like both HIV and transness, a lot of that stuff has come in and been words between me and the world, not having to strive to be good enough or to be any different than I am. Partially you equals you is saying to people, I'm clean, be intimate with me, show me intimacy, I can't harm you. And in a way there's a part of me that wants to scream and say, you know, HIV made me fabulous. HIV made me a fucking great writer. What has it done for you?
Hi, everybody. I'm joining you today from the beautiful, unceded, traditional, ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations. My name is Angela Kaida. I'm an associate prof and Canada Research Chair in the Faculty of Health Sciences at Simon Fraser University. I'm so delighted to be here with you today. I'm joined by my colleagues and filmmaker and inspiration, voice leads of the film HIV Made Me Fabulous. So I'm going to ask Edmond and Juno to introduce themselves to you here today, and then we'll get started with our conversation. Juno, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Hi, everyone. My name is Juno Roche, and I am a writer, and I'm in Andalusia in Spain, in the beautiful sunshine. And I write books essentially now. I seem to write a book every other year. I also write articles and essays, etc., etc. And most of my work is around gender and HIV and bodies and sexuality and relationships. And I have 3 books out currently, and I'm just literally, as we speak, finishing the 4th book. So yeah, that's me. Oh, and I should say that vastly importantly, I'm trans and I've been HIV positive. Kind of, I think it's about 30 years now, which seems like an incredible length of time. But I was diagnosed in the very early 90s and told I had 6 months to prepare myself to be alive for 6 months to a year. And here I am, all those years later.
Hello, my name is Edmond Kilpatrick. I'm a filmmaker, and I have a long history with movement. So I was a dancer for quite a long time, a professional dancer. And I've come to filmmaking, and I've just continued my exploration with, you know, speaking with the body and how the body communicates. And I've been making embodied films now for a few years. And HIV, living with HIV is a bit of a passion project for me. And so I'm really pleased and honored to be able to be here.
Thank you so much, Edmond, and thank you, Juno. It's really quite a delight to speak to both of you as really being the creative force behind the movie HIV Made Me Fabulous. And so we're really curious to hear from you. Like, can you tell us a bit about your process of working together on this film? Juno, do you want to start?
Yeah, it was, I have to say at the start of the film, I had no concept of how it was going to work. I mean, it's one thing to talk about how something's going to work. There's someone in Canada and you're going to talk to them and you're going to kind of, between the two of you, you're going to work up a narrative, and it's going to be this intensely personal journey through a sense of space and security and risk. And, you know, we were looking at U equals U, undetectable equals untransmittable. It's one thing to kind of say that, and then it's another thing to go, well, how's this going to work out? And actually, what did happen was kind of magical, really. I have to say uncomfortable, because I ended up on the phone to Edmond, sitting on the floor trying to balance the phone so that we could do FaceTime and then just do just talking without FaceTime, because that was slightly problematic just in terms of the signal. But we would just talk. We would talk. Edmond, who is quite brilliant, would just ask me questions and then scaffold questions about my past, about, you know, we talked about, you know, anything about my becoming positive. We talked about addiction. We talked about sex work. We talked about where I was and where I was living now, and about being an Andalusia, and about, and I can't remember, Edmund, how long that went on for, but I mean, I think it went on for quite a few months that we had this. How long did it go on for?
It was about 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 months. We had about 4 or 5 conversations. The last one we recorded, but the first 3, I think 3 or 4, we just spent on the phone talking. Yeah. We would have one discussion, and I would be taking notes, and then I would sort of look for the themes, the things that were important to you, the things that kept coming up over and over again. And so I kind of jot down a couple questions for the next discussion, and then I'd sort of bring those up, and then you would, after a while, I started to see what was important to you, because we kept talking, going back to the same themes over and over again.
Okay. I mean, what I really liked about it was that it started off being this really vast. So like, I'm a writer of books. So like, I like writing 3,000 words odd a day. I like writing big books, and I like writing long reads. But I always imagined that I wanted to be a poet.
Yeah.
And this process felt a lot to me like poetry. Like, we started off with all of these words and all of these themes and all of this stuff to cover. And actually what we did was bring it down to a point. I mean, you did that so brilliantly. Because I had no concept how it was going to end up being in any way. But I mean, I think that, and I loved the way that the relationship that we formed through those conversations. I mean, it's a kind of testament to this kind of, I mean, this happened pre-COVID, but it's a testament to COVID time about the kind of links that you can make, not in person. I mean, we make so much about being in person with people, but actually the kind of information that I shared, and to me, yeah, it was a bit like we were writing a poem. I didn't know that at the time. I have to say that I think you did know that. And I think that, yeah.
Yeah, I knew it was gonna be once it got to film, it was gonna be a sense of visual poetry. I mean, as you were sharing so much of your story and your thoughts, I mean, deep down, I was trying to suppress this fear. How am I going to get this all onto film? But I was always looking for something to connect the body to. And quite early on, you started talking about how you felt when you were at conferences. You started talking about how you breathed, and that was restricting your breath, and you had this kind of fluttery breath. And I thought, okay, this is something that every single person on the planet can relate to, like breathing, right? And then I started asking you about your home in Andalusia, and you were talking about your beautiful olive garden and this place where you found peace and you could take deep, long breaths in. And I was like, okay, we're on to something now. And so now I had an act 1 and I had an act 2, and then and then I thought, well, where does it go next? And I just kept listening to you. I didn't know what this film was going to be either. I didn't know how this was going to work, but I just wanted I wanted your words to fuel it, to feed it.
Yeah. What I really liked about the process was that it was like, I'd never worked with a filmmaker before, but I think that you're a very particular kind of filmmaker. So you were thinking in the kind of language of the shapes that a body would make.
Yeah.
And I was coming at it from a completely different, I was coming at it from the internal stuff. Like I've just literally written a book, and there's like a whole chapter about breathing, about trying to control that fluttery breath. And, it's like I remember reading a book once, and it was by someone that I respect, and they were interviewing someone, and the person they were interviewing said, the one thing that we do very badly as humans is breathe easily. We're normally so tense in one way or another that we hold on to our breath, and we just don't allow it to. And when I saw the end product, I have to say, I was completely blown away. I don't think I've ever told you this, but I was completely blown away that my words worked quite so well with everything that had gone on. Because when you're a writer, you're this, not egotistical, it's not about ego, but you know that you produce this book, and it's all you. It's just you in this book, and so it's like it was a brilliant project to be part of, because we worked really well together. It was very nourishing for me in that respect.
Yeah, for me too.
That's such a great word, nourishing. I love that description of your experience. And I wondered maybe if both of you could tell us, like, what did you hope to get across in the film? What were the messages? What were the ideas, feelings that you'd hope to get across?
So I suppose that I always hope to get across in everything that I do, which is that nothing is ever straightforward, and everything is nuanced, and that words are never just words. A single word is never, the word no is never just the word no, that it has a multitude of meanings, depending on who's saying it, how they're saying it, where they're saying it, who they're saying it to, what they're wearing when they're saying it, what the weather's like when they're saying it. All this stuff. And I suppose the thing about HIV is that HIV has been reduced down to being this moral thing, this kind of thing that people get, and it kind of it's kind of labeled as this broken thing. So, I remember getting my HIV diagnosis and being made to feel that I was broken by it, and that I'd always be like a broken member of society. And what I hope to get out of this, but I think actually Edmond's, the dancers, the work did it so beautifully, was that you can have all of this complexity and you can still find calm and space and grace and kind of an elegance with it. Like, we don't have to keep shouting, even though we feel like we have to keep shouting, that we can take some space and time out for ourselves. I think it was Audre Lorde who says, that self-care is activism. That notion of looking after the self to make sure that the self is. So that's what I wanted to get out of it, was when I kept on hearing lots of men talk about you equals you, and I kept thinking, well, that doesn't mean the same thing to women. Words are never the same. We have different power. We live in a patriarchal world. It's really important that we have a feminist lens to this. And boy, do we have a feminist lens in this film. Yeah.
I wanted people to have a new physical experience when they thought about HIV. I wanted to create sort of a new physical experience where they'd be open to hear the words that Juno says differently. The whole idea behind embodied storytelling is to create some sort of a new physical experience. You know, the initial, so many people, you know, a lot of the stigma comes around this initial shock and fear that people feel when they first heard about HIV, especially back in like the 80s and 90s. You know, that initial physical hit was such a strong one. And so much so that you can tell people all about U equals U and all about how, you know, the virus is now managed. And people will hear that, but it doesn't change how they feel. It doesn't change how they will still kind of retract themselves from someone or have to protect themselves, even though, you know, you're cerebrally telling them everything's, you know, different now. It's okay. And I just wanted to see if I could attach an emotional experience to a physical experience to these words, so that people would just be open to re-experience this and reevaluate, you know, what Juno's experience is, and to have a different empathy and compassion.
Yeah, I have to say that I really, so when I hear, especially when I see it written down on Twitter, when people not continue, but post a lot about U equals U, you undetectable, you know, we can't pass it. And to me, it has this air, which is, I kind of see people just saying, love me, love me, love me, accept me, hug me, want me. And what I loved about your film was that didn't say that. No. There were these kind of proud dancers. There's this one moment in the film, and I relate to it on so many levels. And it's the moment when the person is walking down the street and they make this movement, which is kind of like a shudder. And that's how I experience things, which is that kind of, that's gone through me. That's that kind of, and I loved that, because I felt like it was, you know, I always think if women were in charge, it's like this would be different. And it will be different when we are. But I mean, I think that to a certain extent, I think that the heat had been taken out of U equals U. You know, it's just a really basic thing. You know, if it's not showing in your bloodstream, then it can't be passed on. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you've got no money in your bank, someone can't steal it. I mean, it's like if there's nothing there, it can't be moved across. It's like, and I loved the ordinariness of the situations that you filmed in. The scene on the street for me, which seemed to be going uphill, but maybe I've connected that to a different, it was going up the hill. So yeah, and so everything about it worked for me visually. As a visual, it was like, that's a line that I'd write in a book about myself. So I loved that kind of synthesis between our ideas and stuff. And for me, that scene really kind of embodies the kind of conversation around U equals U. It's kind of like, are we still going to do that? Are we still going to talk about this? You know, I think I said to you, to Edmond, and I've said to Edmond, you know, I first of all heard U equals U or undetectable back in the late 90s. This isn't a new concept. You know, we might rebrand it, but it's not a new concept. It's a kindness, and it's an unkindness not to hear it. And what the film does brilliantly, I think, is to say, listen, just sit down and be kind. And just watch the kind of beauty of these movements. Yeah, you did a grand job. I feel like I've got, this is the first chance I've had to tell you, to keep telling you. Grand job, fantastic job.
Well, thank you both. I'm actually going to pick up on that thread, because I think the use of embodied, you've talked a little bit already, Edmond, about embodiment, and you've used the strategy of embodied storytelling. And Juno's really picking up on the ways in which she felt it, like, which is probably the whole point of that type of storytelling. I wondered if you could share with us a little bit more about embodied storytelling and really what you hoped to get across with that method.
Well, I mean, the base at its very basicness, the basic premise behind it is that when we see something, we experience it. So if we're having this conversation, and if I was to like have a, sort of an aggressive or a tense move, you're going to feel that in your own body. And that's part of our, our evolved way of understanding each other's intentions, right? And so, when I made that sort of shudder, you're going to have little neurons fire in your body that recreates that shudder in yourself so that you can understand what my intention is. So if I'm aggressive, you're going to feel that aggression so you can respond to that. So, and understanding that, knowing that, if you're watching a film, I did this as a dancer, but now I'm doing this on film. If you're watching a film, you're watching more or listening to more than just the words or the pictures, but there's a person on that film, and that person, you're responding to that person on a real sort of physical, cellular, neurological level, right? Neurophysical level. And so basically I'm just trying to enhance those moments so that when you hear Juno talk about something, about the vulnerability of meeting someone new. And when you hear those words, and then you see in the women, you see how they react to, an uncomfortable situation, or possibly even like a potentially violent situation. You're going to feel those things in your body as well. And I think this is why we react so, like if you talk about film, this is why, action movies and in the past musicals were so popular, right? Because we're looking for these physical experiences inside our bodies of what we see and what we feel. And it's just a matter of trying to find ways to, if the idea is that there's this kind of blocked, held bias against that creates stigma around HIV, to sort of open that up in the body by seeing people breathe easy, seeing people can move their bodies, the music helps, and to sort of pry some of that stuff apart, or just melt it or ease it apart. Then the words come into the body, and you hear them differently, or you accept them differently, possibly. Or if at the absolute most you empathize with them. That's really what I'm hoping for. And then in the end, it's still the decision is the viewers as to what they're going to do with this information, if they accept it or reject it. But at least they've had a chance to have a fair shot of whether or not this is something that they're going to accept or reject, right? They can put the bias behind, and now in this moment they can hear it, digest it, feel it on their bodies, and then make a decision from there.
I think just to really quickly, what I loved about the movements that were made was that they were really small.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, because I think that there's a notion that women, which is a notion created by men in the Victorian era, when women were seen as being hysterical creatures. If they produced any emotion, it was hysteria. But the truth of the matter is that women are so conditioned by a society that often does wrong to them, that women's movements are really small. I've been thinking a lot recently, because there's been some real Me Too stuff going on in England at the moment, because of an incident that happened by a police person to a woman. And there were lots of women's stories that we were talking about, and most of the women were talking about how they would walk home. If they were walking home on their own at night, they would hold keys in their hands. These tiny little movements that women make, because actually and I loved how your film made those movements strong.
Yeah.
I loved how those movements were epic.
Yeah.
because that's what they were. That's what, and that's, I suppose that's what I always say to people, that when I write, I always feel a bit like I write on a pinhead. And I know that really I should be trying to go out from the pinhead, but I don't. I end up going further and further into a pinhead, because I think that's where my strength is. That's where the strength of my writing. And I felt that in the movements. They were so powerful. I was almost looking for the next movement because it felt like an earthquake. And I loved how that embodied the truth of women in essentially a quite a dangerous patriarchal society, or societies. Different societies. We are not one amorphous society. We are different. And I loved that. I felt like there was a real feminist strength to it. Yeah.
Well, I think the breath, focusing on the breath, took it right down to that pinhead, right?
Yeah, it did. Absolutely. Yeah, it worked. But I mean, it was a real synthesis, because in those moments, that's when I saw my writing and my words really come to life. I mean, I didn't ever write anything, I spoke, but I mean, that my speaking is as is my writing. So I felt like that's when that came to life. Yeah.
Well, let me thank you both for that. I guess very like evocative discussion about embodied storytelling, because we're screening the film HIV Made Me Fabulous as part of the CAHR conference, which is attended by our large community of HIV researchers across the country. So having shared this film with this community, what's your message to the attendees? Like, what is it that you hope that attendees take from the film?
So my hope would be that they would look closer, and that they would look at people rather than looking at, the last 30 years of my life has been a round of viral loads, CD4s, undetectables, new drug regimes, any number of things. And I sometimes wonder if people have ever really seen me, the person. And maybe that's why I became a writer, because I was so incensed that the world had stopped seeing me. And I would just ask anyone that's working in and around this field with people that are HIV, research, frontline, to just see people and to listen to people. And I'm saying that after 30 years of, so it's like I've had 30 years of feeling like I was this set of stuff. And I think what the film does is show that, we're still here. We're still here. And even if you find a miracle cure, there's still going to be this set of people that have HIV and that are living with it. And the stigma can feel unrelenting. So, yeah, be as empathic and as this whole project has been. This whole project for me has been about empathy. So empathy, have empathy.
And how about for you, Edmond? What is it that you hope that the viewers at CAHR take from this film?
I don't know. I mean, Juno explains it so well. I just want people to listen to Juno. I want them to hear her deeply and hear her words. And I hope that they can, some people, I want people who are sharing her story, I want them to be able to relate to the parts of her that they can relate to. And I want them to be inspired by her. And I also want, there's a real sense of hope to Juno's story, right? It was very difficult, but she's empowered herself. She's built a world for herself where she has agency. And I don't know you that well, Juno, but it seems like it's very beautiful. You have a beautiful life that you're living. Yeah. And I want people to walk away from the film seeing these characters also empower themselves the way they have and have hope and have inspiration.
So I feel like I've got to just say one last line, because that was like the nicest thing that I've heard in such a long time. And thank you. But I do want people to realize that actually I haven't just survived. I mean, I have a life now that I could never have imagined ever having. this beautiful house in the mountains of Andalusia, you know, an agent in London, a publisher in Berlin. You know, I have a life that I couldn't have imagined, and HIV made it so. The power of kind of struggling for stuff. I mean, the film, you know, it did make me fabulous. I mean, it did, and it made me very present in every kind of cell and fiber of my body. So thank you, Edmond. It's been a complete pleasure and joy to work with you.
Thank you. For me as well.
Well, thank you both. I think as a viewer, as a researcher, the honor of working with the both of you has really just transformed. I'll speak for myself and our research team, has really transformed our understanding of both the research that we do and the ways in which we can do much better sharing what we're learning through these creative processes. And I'll say, just on behalf of us as a research team, a message that I can give our CAHR attendees is that if you have a chance to work with creative people, writers, filmmakers, to share the work that we do, it really can be a transformative process for yourself as a researcher, and hopefully, you know, we'll look forward to hearing from our attendees, hopefully to those we're trying to get this message across to. So I think on that note, I'll ask both Edmond and Juno if there's anything else that you would like to share before we close our session today.
No, I'm fine. I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you again, Juno. I always say thank you because it was an honor to work with you. And thank you for, you know, for showing the film. Thank you, Angela and Allison, for all the work that you've done to make it happen. And I'm just so glad that it's having a chance to be seen.
Me too. All right, well, thank you both. And we will look forward to connecting, continuing the conversation about this film and this topic and women and feminism and how HIV can make you fabulous.